Some characters who were looked at as throw picks or not worth picking up were picked and banned constantly. One of the most notable ones was Tyra, being banned or picked in nearly every game in the first couple of sets. What are the reasons for this sudden spike in popularity, and how does it reflect on our public games? In this video, the spotlight is on Tyra, the Untamed. So first, it's important to look at the original spark for Tyra's popularity. Back in 1.4, Tyra got a buff for Hunting Party that gave it 2 uses. Now, I always used to say that Hunting Party was a low-key OP, but it was always lacking that little bit of oomph it needed to propel her into the meta. This buff was that oomph. Tyra has always had this long, easy-to-apply, team-wide reveal with a big team-wide damage lamp on top of it. You could often have another mark up before your mark ran out, and the mark has always, for the most part, been uncounterable. You can only get it off with abilities that can cleanse, and there aren't many of them. There are only really a few flanks that have them, and those abilities are very important and often have pretty long cooldowns. So using them to get a mark off is still a big hit to what they can do in that moment. Now, that's a lot that one ability has going for it. But since it's on Tyra, a character that is relatively vulnerable due to a lack of movement, and a character that is outclassed by other characters in terms of consistent damage output, it was never able to break into the meta before, despite how good it is. What the buff did was make the talent so blatantly good that it makes up for Tyra's weaknesses. It's a lot like Torvald in his most recent buff, to put it into perspective. Torvald himself is a very underwhelming character compared to the other tanks, but his bubble is so powerful that it makes up for it. 2 marks gives you and your team more information, it applies more pressure, and it makes it less punishing if you accidentally mark the wrong target. Because let's face it, even though it's very easy to apply, somebody could get in the way and take the mark. Like, let's say you accidentally apply it to a support instead of the DPS you wanted. Your whole team can see the support, but if that support's team isn't leaving any openings to get to them, it's basically a wasted mark because you and your team can't act on it. So you have to wait out the cooldown or get in a limb to reset it. While with 2 marks, you could accidentally waste one and still have another to use on who you meant to use it on, so the margin for error is a lot bigger. Then there's the amount of information you're giving to your whole team. One of the reasons Strix is so powerful is because he can constantly be revealing the entire enemy team. That's a lot of information, and information is power. However, even with how strong the flare is, there's a lot that Tyra's reveal has over it. Yes, Tyra can only reveal 2 people at the most, but that's often enough. While Strix does give a lot of information, it isn't focused information, and what I mean is since Tyra only reveals 2 targets, Tyra can easily tell her team, hey, these are the most important picks right now. These are the people we need to focus on to win. The reveals also stick on them, so it doesn't matter how far they go, they will be revealed until the timer is up. There is also, of course, the damage lamp. You already have your team focusing the target you painted, and on top of that, they all deal 25% more damage to that target, making for a very easy melt. Even if your whole team isn't focusing that target, whoever is fighting that target, even if it's by themselves, has a massive time to kill advantage on them. It's very hard to lose a 1v1 if your enemy has a Hunting Party mark on them. Tyra also fits into more comps than Strix does. Like for example, aggressive comps. Not exactly full-on dive comps cause Tyra can't dive, but let's say you have 2 aggressive tanks like Fernando and Ashe. For that comp to work, the tanks need to be pushing up very aggressively and making space for their DPS who are following close behind. The team as a whole has to play in a very overwhelming way. With Strix, he stays in the back all the time. He can't effectively move up alongside the tanks and play aggressively since he's a sniper. Tyra can stay close to the tanks, move up with them, and play in an aggressive manner. This is another thing with the damage lamps too. If your team is aggressively pushing into the enemy like that, what good is Strix's reveal? You can already see everyone since they're right in front of you, so what's it going to do for you? With Tyra, even though you already see everyone, you still have that damage lamp that you can slap onto somebody while your team is playing aggressive, making it even easier to be overwhelming and get picks off the push. Now, there's another thing I want to bring up with the whole information thing. Again, Tyra may only be able to reveal 2 people, but more often than not, that's enough to know where the whole team is. Obviously, if the whole enemy team is playing split up, 2 marks isn't going to tell you where everyone is. But if they're playing like that, they're probably going to lose anyway. Good teams only ever really split their team in half at the most. Like one tank and DPS goes to one side, and the other tank and DPS goes to the other, while the support takes a position where they can see both groups while staying safe. If you mark one person on one side and one person on the other, you and your team know, hey, these 2 people have marks on them. They probably have somebody with them in the same area. So it's not super specific information like with Strix, but it's enough to get by as long as you put some game sense with it. Now, Tyra isn't exactly played like your traditional DPS character. Her purpose isn't getting out that big damage like somebody like Cassie would. Tyra is more of a support DPS character in a way. Not a traditional support because Tyra can't heal obviously, but a support in the sense that Tyra empowers her teammates. Again, like Torvald, he's not really a tank, he's a bulky support that empowers teammates. It's funny how similar these 2 characters are while still being so very different. Now of course, don't get me wrong, Tyra can still put out some good damage, but your main focus is empowering your teammates. So your co-DPS is often going to be out-damaging you since they're most likely a better all-around DPS character that's taking advantage of your marks. Moving away from Hunting Party, there is something else that has always been good that adds on to how useful Tyra is, and I just want to touch on it a little even though it didn't get messed with at all, and that's her Firebomb. So on top of Tyra being this really good support DPS, Tyra has a lot of area denial with her Firebomb. The Firebomb takes a big area and prevents enemies from standing in that area because they take heavy percent damage and they get 50% cauterized. Even without Burn Monster, this is the bane of tanks. Tanks like Inara and Torvald don't have movement abilities to quickly get out of the fire, and the fire still eats through Inara even with all of her DR. It also works around barriers really well. If Barrett goes to set up somewhere, you can toss the Firebomb on him and he has to leave his whole setup. If Terminus is low and uses his power siphon to block damage and get healed, you can throw the bomb and he either has to burn or put his siphon down to get away and leave himself vulnerable to attacks. With Fernando, Khan, and Makoa, you can do the same thing for the same effect. With Ashe, her barrier is deployed and moves forward, but if you toss down your Firebomb, her barrier advances into it without her because they're obviously not going to follow it into the fire. Anyway, I just wanted to highlight that part of her kit a bit. Now, what's the difference between using Tyra in a coordinated setting like the PPL or scrims, and in a non-coordinated public setting like in our ranked games? Well, at first in the PPL, Tyra was picked and banned basically 100% of the time, but that started to fall off, and that's really the thing with PPL, it's very trendy. Something will get discovered and they will overvalue it and pick and ban it a ton until they start to realize, okay, this isn't that crazy good, we don't need it in every game no matter what. And that's because most characters' full potential comes out on certain maps against certain comps. Few characters can just be picked up whenever, no matter what, and play to their full potential every time. So yes, Tyra has fallen off in PPL a bit, but Tyra is still looked at as a very strong meta pick. Tyra is in a very good spot in the meta still. It's just about looking and deciding where the mark is going to be most valuable and picking Tyra into that, and not picking her into things that punish her too heavily due to her low mobility. Like Drogos, for example, can easily get free combustibles off on her unless her co-DPS is something that punishes him. Cause then Tyra just marks the Drogos and something like an Andro dives him and kills him easily. But again, without something like that, Tyra gets farmed. And that's just one example to put it into perspective for you guys. Now, in a coordinated environment, Tyra is stronger without a doubt, because even though everyone can see your mark, there's no guarantee that people are going to instantly look to who you mark in a public game setting. They could be looking and focusing on something else. In a coordinated setting, you can call out, hey, I put a mark on this character, get them. In public games, that doesn't really happen, so your marks don't get immediately and effectively taken advantage of, unless you mark somebody your teammates are already fighting. But there's no guarantee that's the best target to mark at that time in the fight. This doesn't mean Tyra isn't good in a public game setting, because she most definitely is, but if you're duoing with somebody and you're on comms with them, it can prove to be a lot more effective since you can get them to immediately focus your marks. So in ranked, as far as banning her goes, I wouldn't do it. There are a lot of better bans like Khan, Makoa, Torvald, or Cassie, or situational bans like snipers on their best maps, or Leon or Willow if you're going a heavy sustain comp. As far as picking her, I wouldn't first pick her ever, not over the tanks, but Tyra is a good second rotation pick or a last rotation pick. So yeah, that's the Tyra spotlight. This is my second spotlight video, and if you haven't noticed, these videos are of course for putting the spotlight on a character that is rising up or needs immediate explaining outside of the drafting guide. I am going to do more of them. Characters like Vivian, Ashe, Androxus, and Ying have also been rising up alongside Tyra, so I want to cover them too and get that info out to you guys. Anyway, that's pretty much it, guys. I want to thank you all for watching. I very much appreciate it. Now I'm going to see you guys later. Bye.